Hello again, friends of AI for Autism. Cheers for joining us for yet another fab interview where we hear from members of our community and listen to their stories. We have a special guest with us today. Natalie is a counsellor from Essex, and Natalie is also the mother of two autistic children, daughter Eden and son Rudy, and she's also the mother of two borrowed children as well. Natalie and Rudy were recently featured in news and social media following an incident and a wonderful encounter with an understanding and compassionate gentleman, which we'll hear more about shortly. And today we'll be hearing Natalie's story and we'll get a chance to learn from her experiences. So please welcome Natalie Fernando. Hey, Natalie.
Hello, hi.
How's it going today?
Yes, good, thank you. All well, thank you.
Fantastic.
Good to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. Natalie, we'll dive right in. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how old your children were when they were diagnosed with autism?
Yeah, sure. My daughter was diagnosed at 13. To give you a bit of history, my daughter is from a previous marriage. So my two children that are both autistic are from two different marriages, so they're half brother and sister. We don't recognize that, they're just brother and sister. So it was just me and her, because my ex-husband and I split when I was pregnant with her, and it was just the two of us. And I wonder whether that was maybe one of the reasons why I didn't notice that there were differences with Eden, or actually I did notice there were differences, but I liked them. She was quirky and unusual, and I was a single mum and she was my buddy, and I just celebrated all of her quirkiness and have always been somebody to say, don't follow the crowd, don't be a sheep, you know, I like different. And so we really didn't notice that there was anything different about her until I met my husband now, and he has two children who are a similar age. One is exactly the same age as my daughter and the other one is a couple of years younger, and I'd known them since they were tiny. And watching them being able to do things such as dressing themselves and quite what you would class as normal, for want of another word, it highlighted that my daughter was struggling in some areas that I would have thought she'd be able to cope with. So when it came to academia, she's very, very bright, very articulate. She was quite sociable. But it was things like I was still dressing her at 8 or 9 years old, and neither me nor her realised that that was a problem until I was like, oh, my husband was, should you be dressing her? Shouldn't she learn how to dress herself? You know, and little things like that. And then when she was 9, my husband and I had little Rudy, and Rudy was diagnosed very quickly. He was diagnosed at 2 years and 10 months. And I often say, my experience is that boys just let it all hang out. They are just who they are. And so it is usually, not all the time, but usually easier to notice that there is something going on. Whereas girls are brilliant at masking. They're fantastic at mimicking what they should be doing or what's expected of them and holding it all in until they get to such a point in their life where the demands on them become too much. And that point for my daughter was when she started secondary school. She goes to a grammar school, so she's expected to achieve to a certain level. It's the school she wanted to go to. And after the first couple of weeks at school, she just fell apart. And it was little things like people touching her in the corridors, bumping into her, and bigger children, and the level of respect that the teachers expected, and she couldn't understand that. And that's how she was diagnosed later. We then started to realise, you know, she's struggling, she needs a little bit of help. And in order for us to get the right help for her, we needed to know what was going on. So we got her diagnosed at 13. My son, as I say, was under 3, but my son has also got a global development delay. He has been diagnosed with sensory processing disorder. He's presenting with learning difficulties, and he has challenging and sometimes aggressive behaviour when he has a meltdown or things don't go according to plan. My daughter has been diagnosed with autism. 100% has sensory processing disorder, but it's not been diagnosed. But she definitely has problems sensory wise, more so than anything else. I'd say that's probably her biggest challenge.
That's absolutely amazing. And it's fascinating considering the other parents we've spoken to as well, and what she mentioned about masking. We're having boys who are diagnosed at a very young age and daughters later on in their teens, in some cases in 20s. One lady we spoke to, her sister was diagnosed in her early 30s, and another lady we spoke to in 40s. But when they found out, they're like, it all made sense. And it's beautiful how at an early age, when you accepted, you encouraged, and you appreciated Eden's quirkiness, her uniqueness. And I guess that's why your handle on Instagram and your blog is better to be different, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that is because I really live and believe that from my heart. And I've said before that there is a common myth that all autistic people are the same. And if I'm really honest, and I'm all about honesty, my blog is honesty, and I think that's why people relate to it. I document the good, but also the challenging and the tough and the bad. I don't just paint it out to be something it isn't. And I would say before my son was diagnosed, maybe the reason I didn't pick up on my daughter's differences as being autistic is because I also had this image of what, you know, autistic was. And to me, it was, you know, hands over the ears and not able to have any kind of warmth or empathy with anyone. And then my son came along, who is the most loving child I have ever come across in my life. And he's so funny, and he's got the most amazing personality, and he's really charming. But I even had the teachers at his preschool saying, no, he can't be autistic because that's not what autistic people do. So I've got these doctors. He was diagnosed twice because I was like, oh, are you sure? Are you sure? And I've got these doctors with combined experience of like 50, 60 years telling me he's autistic. And I was still going, yeah, but, you know, he's really loving and autistic people aren't. And I now know that you meet one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. And, you know, I said to my husband the other day that I genuinely love the diversity of every neurodiverse person I've ever met. And my two children have got the same condition. They've got, you know, autism spectrum disorder. And yet they are chalk and cheese. They couldn't be more different. And I sometimes joke to my husband and I said, I think that if I lined up 10 neurotypical people, they would probably be more similar than if I put 10 autistic or neurodiverse people in a room. And I've always loved different people. And so for me, having these two different, totally different to the norms in my life, challenging, yes, of course, as a parent is challenging, but it's fantastic. It's just a completely different way of looking at the world, and I love it. I absolutely love it.
Absolutely, like chalk and cheese. And it's fascinating the conversation that we've had with many people over the past year as well, just discovering that how different is one autistic person to another. Well, as different as one neurotypical person is to another.
Yes.
Everybody's different.
Exactly.
Everybody's different. And this leads me to my next question as well. You already mentioned how you were when you discovered Eden's quirkiness and uniqueness, and then later on Rudy's. After discovering they were autistic and what that meant, I suppose since Eden came much early on, how did you feel, and how have you seen yourself change as a person and as a mother?
Well, with Eden was able to cope quite easily in the world up until she started secondary school, and we were unaware that she was autistic. We just thought she was a little bit different. So really, I think autism didn't really come into my life, even though it was there and I didn't know. It didn't really come into my life until Rudy was diagnosed. And Rudy was a very, I don't like saying he was a challenging child because he's a loving child. I struggled to parent him because I was trying to use all the methods that I know how to parent on this child that just wasn't responding. You know, I can't say to Rudy, you need to go and sit on the naughty step for 2 minutes because you've done, he just wouldn't understand that, and he'd maybe throw something at me. So it was like trying to squeeze a, you know, round peg into a square hole. I just wasn't getting anywhere. And again, I'll be honest in that when he was diagnosed, I think I felt a sense of loss, which led to a sense of guilt, because I think when you, and especially because Rudy was a child of a new relationship, a much healthier relationship, I think when I was expecting him, you build up this kind of fantasy as to what your child is going to do. And 9 times out of 10, they don't do those things. Any child, they do their own things, but you would still expect them to do preschool, be able to go to the zoo with you, go up to London for the day, start school at the local school, and I'd meet new parents and make new friends, and all of these norms I'd built up in my head. And then when Rudy was diagnosed, it was a little bit like having the carpet ripped from underneath me. Mm-hmm. And I felt quite a sense of loss. But I couldn't work out what I'd lost, because I was like, well, here's this beautiful little boy in front of me offering me something completely different. Why do I feel like that? And it was because I'd lost all of that kind of fantasy that I'd created. Once I realized that that was what's going on, and I'm also trying to learn a new way of parenting and dealing with, and it is a life-changing diagnosis because our life is completely different now and it affects the whole family. And once I'd accepted that you've just got to let that go now, that you've got something different now, then it's been okay. We're happy. It's challenging, but we're really happy. But I do think that there's an awful lot of people out there that get after diagnosis that feel that way, and they don't want to admit it because it almost feels like you're rejecting the child you have, and it's not. You'll love the child that you've got, but you've also equally got to accept the loss of the child you thought you were going to have. And I think, again, it's honesty, and I think it was important for me to process that. Mm-hmm. But then now, 3 or 4 years down the line, Rudy has made me, both of my children have made me a better person, and I couldn't see that then. And I look back now and I like me more. I definitely like me more. I don't think I was a massively judgmental person, but now I do not judge any situation to a point where anybody could say anything to me about somebody. And I'd go, the other day, a car came flying past us. My husband and I were out, and it was a yellow Ferrari, and it came past us really quickly. And my husband said, oh, to be able to just go out on a Sunday and drive around the roads. And I went, you don't know that he's not rushing to see his mum in hospital. You don't. And I really don't judge any situation anymore. And Rudy taught me that, because we have been judged, and he really, and I'm patient, I'm tolerant, and I look back at the person I was before Rudy and the person I am now, and I wouldn't change me and I wouldn't change him, because if taking away his autism would change his personality, then I'll live with the challenges, because his personality is amazing.
That's absolutely amazing and truly beautiful. From guilt, from loss, and evolving into something so beautiful like acceptance and understanding and being non-judgmental. I'm sure many parents can actually resonate with this, or at one of the stages, depending on where they are right now. And it'll be very interesting to hear about from your words the story about your encounter with Mr. Ian Shelley, and where judgment fits in, where acceptance and the wider understanding. Because I'm sure when you're out in public, whether it's with Rudy or by yourself, you probably pick up on certain things that you realize, that child is potentially autistic, and you can probably offer that glance of understanding or the words of understanding, which will come to that later. I'm jumping ahead a little bit. And that was the next thing. You mentioned your husband, and also you touched on, what the services were like, having to push for a diagnosis. How were friends and family towards Rudy, towards Eden, after discovering they were autistic? And what was support like from friends and family and from services?
I think if I look at them separately, services is something I'm very passionate about at the moment. So anyone that follows my page is going to start to see more coming through. Because you get your child gets a diagnosis and they're discharged generally on the same day. And I'll never forget being in the paediatrician room with Rudy. And I'll never forget it because he destroyed it. I remember him running around just destroying this room. And the doctor said to us, the paediatrician said to my husband and I, yes, Rudy, he's autistic and we believe he's global development delay. And he went through the diagnosis with us. And he then said to us, do you have any questions? And we were just stunned. We knew there was something going on, but you feel a bit of a relief, because you're like, I knew I wasn't making it up. I knew there was something going on. But then you also feel like, okay, it's a mixed feeling. And he said, have you got any questions? And we kind of just went no, because we knew nothing. And he went, okay, well, I'm going to discharge you here. Unless there's any physical things that happen that are related to autism. He said sometimes there can be things, then you'll get a re-referral through your doctor. And other than that, good luck. Sent us away with a leaflet, I think. And we went home and we bought, my husband and I are readers. We bought every book you could imagine. And we thought, right, we're going to learn what this is all about. We're going to let Rudy teach us. We're going to do what we need to do. But it was really hard. That first year after diagnosis was by far the hardest for us, because Rudy was really challenging. He was completely nonverbal. He couldn't get any of his needs across to us. We were trying so hard. We were coming to terms with the diagnosis. We were trying to parent. It was really tough. And we had nobody to speak to because we'd been discharged. And 6 months later, I had so many questions and I had nobody to direct them to. And I'm passionate about this being changed because I hear it from so many people. And I really believe that there should be a follow-up appointment after diagnosis, because this is life-changing. Not for the worst, but it is life-changing. And there are so many questions that I then had for that paediatrician, and I had nowhere. And I had to go back to the doctor, go back for a referral. That took 9 months to come through. So by this point, we're 18 months down the line, and I managed to get in front of a paediatrician to ask, things, can we get help for this? Can we get help for that? So Rudy's really lucky. We're really lucky. Rudy goes to an amazing special needs school, and he is in the special class in the special needs school, which is really for children with more complex needs.
Yeah.
So there's there's never more than 10 children, normally around 7 in his class, and there's 4 or 5 adults. So he gets really good care. He gets lots of therapies outside, occupational therapy, speech therapy. He really gets lots of regulation time. So he'll learn for a few minutes and then go outside and jump on the trampoline. And so he's really very lucky. But I speak to so many people whose children maybe don't get diagnosed, they're 4 or 5, so they're already at mainstream school. Trying to get into a special needs school is not easy because they're all so oversubscribed. And it's really tough. And then you literally get told, yeah, it's autism and we'll discharge you. To me, it's mind-boggling. Anything else, there would be a review, a follow-up. So from the services point of view, it's disappointing. And I know that it's worse in other parts of the country. And from our experience, it is disappointing. Family and friends, I will say one thing, you find out who your friends are very quickly. Rudy, it would be challenging for me to take Rudy around to somebody's house. When people say, oh, well, okay, then let's take him out for a picnic. Rudy would not sit still and eat a picnic. So I have to look at what's fun for him, but also what's fun for us, my other children, and me just running around after Rudy. Sometimes if it's just us, it's fine. But if you're trying to meet with friends, and yeah, they're not all the most understanding, but I do have a handful that have been amazing. That would just say, bring him round. And, one of my good friends had a swimming pool. That was fantastic because my son would just lay in the swimming pool for hours. So that really gave mummy a break. Put his armbands on, put him in the pool, and he was just so happy. And yeah, so I've got a couple of friends that have been absolutely amazing. Family have been supportive, but it's hard. It's really hard because they're presented with this little boy, and every method and means that they know how to communicate doesn't work. And they're not there every day like I am, and they're having to find a whole new way. Yes. So for some family members have just embraced it, and they're just like, we'll just sit back. And, my mum's brilliant. She's very much sit back and let Rudy come to me and what Rudy wants. And Rudy does prefer men on the whole to women. So if you're a woman in the family, it's a little bit harder, whereas the men, he just loves cuddling and being around.
Yeah.
And
so
then
if I may jump in there, when you say prefer the men, both physical embrace and or conversation, or when I say conversation, I know it's non-verbal, but interaction, so physical interaction, playing with what type of interaction? Sorry to cut in there. I was very curious.
Please, it's fine.
This is the first time when I've heard that there's quite a distinct response between the different genders. So I was curious to find out as to how he interacts with the men and how he doesn't interact with women.
Yeah, so with men, with a man, he will just go straight up to a man, and we've had to be careful because of safety reasons. So if we're out in a park, Rudy will just go up to a strange man and cuddle them. So we have to really watch this with Rudy. There's no sense of awareness or danger.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a physical size. I don't know what it is, but he has always been drawn more to men than to women, except for me. And I'm his absolute world. But the way he interacts with me is different. So he likes to smell my head, and he'll come up to me and say, "Mummy, head," and I have to bend down 1,000 times a day. And it's almost like he's just, through his smell, yeah, that's okay, that's my mum, that's, but with other women that would come into the family, he wouldn't do anything towards them. He just wouldn't do anything. He's like, granddad, nanny's doing all the work, and he's granddad, and then my mum will have to work a little bit harder to be able to engage him. Although I think I'm starting to see a bit of a shift. Very recently, I'm starting to see a bit of a shift in that. But for some members of the family, it's really hard work, and therefore, are you going to put the work in or not? It's not, so it's mixed. It's very different. With Eden, it's fine, because from the outside world, Eden presents completely okay, for want of another word. So it's quite easy to get along with Eden. Eden's challenges are much more behind the scenes. They're, challenges that she would put on this face. And then when we get home, she might say to me, "Mummy, I really struggled with that," or "I'm finding this really hard," or, and so with Eden, it's been less obvious, but with Rudy, it's a lot of work, and you have to be prepared to put that in with him.
Yeah.
And it's rewarding, rewarding though, if you do, because it means so much more when you get something back, and, it's fab.
Yeah, I thank you very much for sharing this, and I think this does somewhat tie into the next question. I know there's a distinct age difference between Eden and Rudy, and while they were both growing up, everyone's still growing up, I know they're quite still young, and you've mentioned some of the challenges. Do you mind elaborating on some of the challenges that both of them faced as they were growing, or as they are growing?
So Rudy's biggest challenges at the moment are transitions. So time for school, and to get him, if he's in the middle of something, that is a big flashpoint for him. If he's, so a good example is this morning, he wanted me to draw something that he'd found on YouTube. He likes watching us recreate things. So he will pause a scene in a movie or a scene on a YouTube nursery rhyme, and he'll want us to build it out of Lego, or he'll want us to draw it. And I was drawing it for him because we had 10 minutes to wait till his transport arrived. And I didn't finish it because I couldn't finish it, because it would have taken me about 20 minutes to do it. Yeah. And he was like, he got very upset that he didn't want to go to school. And I kind of understand it, but we have to find a way to be able to stop that. We use lots of visuals with Rudy. So we have first and then boards where you'll say first school, then drawing. And we have visual timetables with him. Rudy is starting to speak, so he says lots of words. He's got a huge vocabulary of words. Yeah. He can repeat pretty much any word you say. He just doesn't have the conversation, and his understanding is quite limited. So if you were to say to Rudy, "How old are you?" he wouldn't understand what you were saying, but he can count to 20, and things like that. So for Rudy, we're transitioning at the moment with backing up his verbal communication with the visuals, as opposed to a year ago it was just all visuals. So the challenges for him are definitely transitions, and if something doesn't go according to his plan, we don't always know what his plan is. That's often the problem. But if we were out for a walk and he wanted to walk in a certain direction, but we couldn't because, I don't know, maybe there was something in the road that was stopping us to walk there, that would be a problem for Rudy. Or if, say, he's had a packet of crisps and he wants another packet, and we're like, you can't have 2 packets of crisps because you've eaten too much today, that, would be at a point where he may start to struggle. And Rudy, that's when you would see that more aggressive behaviour in Rudy. He doesn't know how to self-regulate. He's learning. He's really trying so hard. He's getting lots of certificates at school and awards at the moment for really trying hard, and I can see it. I would say that potentially there might be a dozen times in a day that could lead to quite an aggressive outburst with him. And yet at the moment, I'd say only 2 or 3 of those are leading down that path, because he's really learning he likes to be squeezed quite tight, and he's learning ways that can just bring him down, and so that we can then communicate with him. Because it's really important to understand that when an autistic person, a child or adult, is having a meltdown, from my experience, limited as it may be, but from what I've seen, they lose themselves. I can tell you, there is no intention behind my son. When my son hits me or throws something at me, it's not because he wants to hurt me, you know, that's not there, because he's the most loving little boy. But at that moment in time, he doesn't really know what he's doing. And, you know, I suppose sometimes I think, is it because he expects me to have all the answers and to know it all for him? And when I don't, it doesn't go his way. Afterwards, it's awful, because he's so distressed and exhausted. It really is quite a really hard thing to watch your child go through. Now, my daughter, her challenges really are much more sensory, so very limited with her food intake. Both my children have food issues, not issues, but limited food. My daughter, very much so. She really struggles with textures of things. If she does this thing, if there's lots of sounds going on, she's got this unique superpower where she can block everything out and just listen to one thing.
Wow.
Which is fantastic. So you could have somebody having a conversation over there, someone having a conversation, the TV on, the music on, and she can completely zone out and listen to that one thing. But that has its problems in that if we're all talking to her at the same time, and that was tough, because being a single mum with her, my sister and my mum had a big influence on Eden. They were like second and third mum to her. So at a point a few years ago, we would all be telling her what to do at once, and you could see her really struggle. So now we all know one person has to speak, you know, and things like that. Human interactions, she struggles with eye contact, and she doesn't really like being touched. So my son, who is really loving and really affectionate, when I say loving outwardly, you know, affectionate, loving, whereas my daughter, she, again, a very loving child, but doesn't show that in affection. She shows it in other ways. When she was little, she used to write me letters and leave them on my pillow. And I've kept a lot of those, because I didn't get lots of cuddles from Eden, because it made her uncomfortable, and I wouldn't force that. But I got it in other ways. So she really struggles with that touch, which became a problem for her at school because of the volume of people in the classroom. Rather than having my daughter gets overwhelmed like my son does, but she has more of a shutdown than a meltdown. I don't know if you've heard of a shutdown. You probably have.
For the benefit of our listeners, feel free to elaborate on the differences.
Yeah, so from my experience of my 2 children, meltdown is a bit more outward. It's a bit more obvious. Now, children do it in different ways. My son does it by throwing things and, you know, uses physicality. My daughter will just completely shut down, so that it's almost like she can't hear you and she can't speak. Or if she does speak, it's so quiet that I cannot hear her. I'll have to say to her, Eden, I can't hear you, or I give her that time. And the things that help her are you know, slime, sounds crazy, you know, goo. She plays with that and it will bring her back out of it. It's almost like it makes her more aware of what's going on around her again. And so it's very different, which again is why I didn't really notice it with Eden. With Rudy, it was so in my face what was going on, whereas with Eden, she would just go very, very quiet. And the other thing, just talking about that's happening more with Eden as she's going into teenage years. She's 14 now. She has these quite serious social hangovers, which a lot of people may laugh at, but it's a real thing. And, you know, if she goes out with, she's not got loads of friends, but she's got some really special friends, really important. And if she goes out with them for a day, the next day she is done. And it's real. It's like, she's exhausted, and, you know, and we just leave her and she just hangs in her bedroom and just, you know, feed her and make sure she showers and leave her to it. So that is something that she's really learning to deal with. She now knows not to schedule on a weekend. She wouldn't do something on a Saturday and a Sunday. That would be too much for her. She wouldn't be able to cope, or she would do it and then it would come out in behaviour that just isn't who she is, really.
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely fascinating what you said, simply because not too long ago we had an interview with an autistic mother, and she introduced me to the 12 spoons principle. Maybe you might be familiar with it.
No, I've
And
not. No.
I believe, based on my understanding, each spoon represents, say, an energy level. And for a neurotypical person who might be handling certain tasks, they might require certain less spoons to deal with it. So if we were to equate an amount of energy that a person has with a number of spoons, say 1 spoon to have a conversation, but for someone who might be autistic, that's 10 spoons put towards the Zoom call. So for example, the lady who I spoke to, had the conversation with, after our 1.5 hour Zoom conversation, should be resting for the rest of the afternoon. So it makes a lot of sense when you mentioned what Eden experiences, and having to, for lack of a better word, recover the next day after having gone out and met her friends.
She also at school, I think somebody gave me a great analogy, which I love and I think of a lot, and this really sits with Eden more so than with Rudy. Somebody said to me, it's like having a Coca-Cola bottle, and when they something happens, so the teacher does something in a different way than you need it, you get a little shake of the Coca-Cola bottle, and then maybe the canteen hasn't got the lunch that you normally have, so that's another little shake of the Coca-Cola bottle, and then you turn up to class and someone's taking your seat, so another little shake, but the lid's still on, and then you get home and you take the lid off and it goes everywhere. And that, I really think, would be one of the challenges that Eden's dealing with, managing all those little things at school and then being able to get in the front door and release it, but in a way that's safe for her and for us, you know, and in a way where she's able to get that out, because I'm a big believer in it needs to be out there in order to be healthy mentally. You need to, you know, be able to in some way express, or, you know, vent, for want of another word, these feelings and thoughts that are going on. And for Eden, that analogy really sits, because she copes with it, and then eventually it just kind of explodes. And it's about being able to give a little bit of time between each shake for her to just, you know, come back down again. Yeah.
That's a beautiful analogy. I'm going to keep that in my mental banks and also as well. The next question was a bit of a generic question. I think you've already answered it in the last few, regarding tell us about your experience as a parent to autistic children in 2021. And also the next one, when I was going to ask about the unique personality traits of your children, and you've already mentioned the stark difference being like chalk and cheese between Eden and Rudy. And I know, based on everything that you've learned, we've mentioned the blog, but in your own words, what did you set out to do, and how have you gone about raising awareness, Natalie?
So I think I started the blog really about 18 months ago, and it was really more for me, being a counsellor. I maybe understood a little bit quicker, although that often counsellors are the last people to understand themselves, but maybe I was able to really try to step out of my own body and look in and think what's going on. And after, you know, chatting with people close to me, I was able to notice that I was experiencing some feelings that I was struggling with. I'll remember one point, I remember vividly looking at myself in the mirror and not recognizing the person. Wow. I just didn't know who I was. I really felt like I'd lost so much. And I say that now, and as I'm saying it, I don't even like hearing myself say it, because I've got so much, but I just at that time didn't see it. It all just felt like everything was wrong. And I look now and I think, no, it wasn't wrong. It was just a different way, you know, and now I can accept that. So I think from the blog, really, I just started writing about my feelings. And a couple of my friends, and I'd maybe post them on my Facebook page, and a couple of my friends said, oh, these are lovely, you're writing really nicely, you should share these. And I shared them, and, you know, lots of people were like, oh, I really relate to that and things. And we got a small following, 1,000 people or so. And it was really about being able to give those with SEN in their lives, those with special needs in their life, a place where they can see they're not alone, because I felt really alone when Rudy was diagnosed. With Eden, it wasn't as outwardly challenging. She has the same challenges. Her experiences are not easier, but as from a parent's perspective, she was easier to parent, and that's, you know, maybe not the right thing to say, but it is a fact. Whereas Rudy, it was so challenging to parent him that it was harder with him. So I was writing all these things out, and it was really about other people not being in my position where they felt so alone, being able to go somewhere and go, I feel like that, and it's okay to feel like that because she feels like that. And the other thing really was for people that don't have SEN in their life to just understand it, because I would have loved to have had an opportunity to have understood this, because it's only now that I might speak to people and I'll say, oh, my son's autistic, that they go, oh, my nephew is, or my niece is, or my daughter is, or my, because a lot of people don't just volunteer that information. And I probably volunteer it less. I wait, you know, I've got no need to just go around screaming that Rudy's autistic, but we are an autistic and proud family. We believe that the neurodiversity that exists in our family is what makes our family amazing. So we probably are maybe a bit louder about it than some, but it was really about being able to say to people that don't have SEN in their lives, look, these are the challenges these children are facing, and these are the challenges these parents are facing. And do you know what? Just maybe have a little thought about how difficult it may be for somebody else, or just look in somebody else through somebody else's eyes to see what life could be like. And then obviously I had the Ian encounter, which we'll talk about in a second. Yeah. And it just it went absolutely crazy, and as a result of that I've now got a much bigger following, which is fantastic. And I've had so many people reach out to me saying exactly what I set out to do. Oh, I felt so alone, I found your page and now I don't. And you know, I did a post the other day about Rudy, and so many people said, wow, that you literally have said the words that are in my head, but I can't get them out. I don't know how to say it, and you've just said it. And other people saying, I didn't have any idea how to interact around a parent or a child when they were struggling in this way. And now, because of what you've written or because of what you've seen or told us or shared, I now do. And so it feels good that that's happening, that we're seeing that happen.
Yeah, that is wonderful. And I would like to say that I wouldn't say that 1,000 is a small following. That's 1,000 people who felt they've connected, they understand. Yeah. And for them, it's a safe place where you've effectively, when you share your words and your experiences, you effectively give other people the permission to open up and speak about theirs. And in doing so, the feeling of loneliness is greatly reduced. And if there's anything I've encountered over the past year with the autistic families and individuals and parents we've spoken to, is that feeling of loneliness until they realize that there are other parents out there who are going through the very same thing or learning very similar things and having similar parenting experiences, which is absolutely beautiful. I mean, really well done to you, and also being, as you said, I love it, autistic and proud family. It's beautiful. Now, I do have a question now. You've mentioned some of the sensory sensitivity issues, and perhaps from this we can springboard to your encounter with Mr. Ian Shelley. And yeah, could you tell us a little bit more about the sensory issues that Eden faces, and also some of the ones that Rudy faces, and then what led to the encounter and what led to the story that went viral nationwide and on social media?
So for Eden, it's very Phil for Eden's. So she gave me an example just this morning where there was she walked into the classroom and there was some mango on the floor, the fruit. It was just left, somebody had left it on the floor. And her teacher, her head of year, said, girls, can you pick that up, please? And she just froze, because the thought of touching that for her, it was too much. So that she can't bear anything, it has to have a certain feel. So she can't, this sounds like a cop-out. I thought for a long time she was just saying this to get out of emptying the dishwasher, but she wasn't. She can't pick plates up out of the dishwasher, because you know that dry feel. She can't, it literally, I watch her, you know when someone runs their finger down the chalkboard and you get that kind of response? That's what Eden gets, that real like, oh, she really can't bear it. She really struggles with eye contact. So this has been a big thing, and this is why the diagnosis was the best thing, because she used to have so many teachers saying to her, look at me when I speak to you. The minute she looks at someone, she can't hear their words. That's how she described it to me. If I look at them, I can look at them, I can't hear a word they're saying. Whereas if she looks away, she can hear them. But when she looks away, she looks like she's being defiant and rude, which she just isn't. So she struggles with that. When people say, have respect for me, she doesn't even know what that means, because to her, it's very literal. Yeah. What does that mean to you? Because that could mean something different to everybody. So with Eden, food, she won't try foods. And she said to me once, I won't try it in case I don't like it. And I said to her, but if you try it and you know you don't like it, then it's gone. But what if you do like it? And she was like, yeah, I'm not gonna do that. And she just, so she's really fixed the idea behind something. Her sense of taste is unbelievable. If I make spaghetti bolognese and maybe put a herb in that's slightly different that nobody else would pick up on, she'll go, what's different about this spaghetti bolognese? And she's on it. I try and disguise things sometimes, can never get away with that with her. So for Eden, it's really all about the touch and the feel of things. For Rudy's harder with Rudy to know, because he's only just learning really to be able to, we're only just learning to pick up on what it is he needs. But I do know that there is definitely an issue with Rudy around his self, so his body. He doesn't feel weight. So, if you and I sit in a chair, you feel the weight of your body go into the chair and you feel that. He doesn't feel that. So Rudy will bounce up and down on a chair over and over. And what he's trying to do is feel the weight beneath his bottom on the chair. He'll run into kind of us. So if we're standing there, he'll run into us really quick. Often he's a big boy, so, he kind of puts me off my balance. He likes being really deep pressure. So he likes to be really squeezed quite hard. And he likes me laying on him. So he'll lay on his tummy and he likes me laying on him. He likes the feeling of the weight. And what that is, I'm still learning, but it's definitely something to do with his body. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's millions of people out there that can tell me what that is. He'll sometimes hit himself. So it's all around his body and how he feels himself. Yeah, so that's really the biggest. Also food, we have food problems with Rudy, but I think Rudy's is less about flavour, because Rudy will eat any flavour of crisp you give him. But I think for Rudy, it's more about safety. I know that food, I'll eat it. And he will sometimes try new things. I think it's more of a texture thing for him. So a crisp, he'll eat any flavour because it's got the texture he expects. But somebody said to me once that if you give a child a piece of chocolate, it always tastes the same, because it's manufactured, it's processed, it's loaded with sugar, and the chocolate we buy in the shops, and milk chocolate, and it will always taste like milk chocolate. Whereas if you give a child an apple, some apples taste sweet, some apples are a bit more sour, some apples have a different colour skin. So, and therefore that really makes sense to me why Rudy would go for something more processed rather than vegetables, which can always have, or fruit, which can always have a slightly different taste. It's that certainty for him of knowing what he's getting. And when he crunches on a crisp, he knows the texture he's getting. Also, Rudy will cover one eye often when he wants to focus on something. And I'm wondering if he sees more detail. Right from a really young baby, when he was about a year old, he used to put books really close to his face. And I used to think he surely can't see the pictures, but I wonder if it's where he's trying to block things out. He'll close one eye and point. You can get more of a accurate point if you shut one eye. He'll do things like that. And I saw this fantastic video about this nonverbal autistic woman, and she is able to talk through a computer. And she said that when I see a face, I see 1,000 faces. And I don't think it's like that for Rudy, but I do wonder whether he sees a lot more detail, and it kind of can be a bit overwhelming. If we walk into a new restaurant, he'll often hide, or anywhere, he'll hide behind my legs to kind of take a minute to take everything in.
That's absolutely phenomenal. Thank you very much for sharing that with us, Natalie. And would you like to tell us, now we've come to that bit that kind of led us to finding out about you. It was a friend of mine who sent me a BBC News article, and he said, Shaheen, you might want to speak to this lady. I said, great, I'll reach out to her on Instagram. And here we are.
Yeah.
In your own words, I could read out from the article, they'll just be really boring. But in your own words, do you mind sharing the story? And apologies if you've done so already hundreds of times, whether it's to different news outlets, to friends or family or anyone else. Would you like to tell us a little about that encounter and the lessons that the wider community can learn from that when it comes to awareness? So please fire away.
Yeah, so I dropped my daughter at school, and my daughter goes to school in Southend, which is a town near us, and it's a seafront town. And Rudy likes to do a little walk along. He calls it a walk with the boats because it's along the sea. And one of the problems we have with Rudy when we take him out for a walk is that he doesn't like turning round and going back. So often we'll do walks that are in a circuit so that he never has to do that. He used to have the same problem in the car. So if we used to reverse and turn around, he'd get really distressed. We would have to go all the way around to turn around, and he still has this. But this particular walk, you get to a point where you can't go any further and you have to turn around and walk back. And we got to the point, he was having a lovely walk, and we got to the point where he turned around, and normally I can get him an ice cream at the end, but I think COVID, and it was very early in the morning, it was shut, but I had a little bit of chocolate with me. And I said to Rudy, here, you come back with mummy, and here's a little bit of chocolate. And, and he was okay. I could tell. Rudy does this thing called scripting when he's starting to, what I call bubble, when I notice that he's getting a bit overwhelmed, he starts scripting almost quite manically, which is where he will repeat scenes from a movie, and he'll do it over and over and over and over, and that is often a sign that he's becoming distressed. And I think it helps him focus on himself and his little world. And he started scripting, so I knew he was struggling, but I thought, no, it'll be fine, we'll just walk him back. And then we got to a point in the road where he has to hold my hand because it's a little bit too close to the cars, and that was just too much. And I asked him to hold my hand, and with the turning around and the holding hands, it was too much, and he slumped to the floor. And it was on the back of a 2-week holiday, so I was feeling quite tired. It was Easter, and I just stood back looking, thinking, okay, because you have to assess very quickly, how am I going to handle this? Because one thing to just overwhelm him just that little bit too much will send him into a meltdown, and I don't want to see him have a meltdown because I don't want to see him go through it. I don't want to see the distress after, but also I don't want to deal with it because it's hard. And so I just stepped back for a second and thought, just leave him for a minute, he may be okay. And in the past, I may have laid down on the floor with him. We've done that in shopping malls and in supermarkets and in petrol stations and car parks, and people just walk over you, you get used to it. But at this moment, I just thought, I'm just going to see where this goes. And a few people were running past because it's quite a wide path for runners and joggers and cyclists, and a few people were coming past. And actually, a few minutes before this had happened, we'd had a couple that were trying to get their little baby to sleep. When I say little baby, maybe a year old. And Rudy's quite loud because he was doing this scripting, and they were and tutting at us and shaking their head. And I said, oh, I'm really sorry. I'm not going to stop and say, I'm really sorry, my son's, got special. I do that 1,000 times a day. So I just said, oh, I'm sorry, and carried on walking. And then he's done this slump into the ground, and a few people ran past. And then this jogger just ran up and stopped. And he said, are you okay? And I just went, yeah. And he went, is he having a tantrum? Because you would just assume, and that's fine. And I said, yeah, because I thought, I don't know this man. I'm not going to start telling him our life story. So I just went, yeah. And he turned around and he looked down at Rudy and he went, what's your name, son? And that's at that point, I thought, oh, he's really trying to be so nice, and Rudy's not going to respond. So I said to him at that point, oh, my son's autistic and he probably won't understand what you're saying. And before I could even almost finish my sentence, he was on the ground. And I've now found out that what he noticed was Rudy was stroking the ground. I didn't know this at the time because I wasn't at this point looking at Rudy, I was talking to him, and he stroked the ground, and he said, well, I'll lay down here with you and I'll chat to you down here then. And he was going, oh, this ground is nice. Yeah, it's quite nice stroking it. And then Rudy kind of looked at him, and I've mentioned he likes men. And it may have been different had it been a woman, I don't know, probably not, because it was the distraction. And he looked at Ian, and Ian looked at Rue, and then Rudy stood up, and Ian stood up, and Rudy took his hand, and he was smelling his hand, because that's what he does, he smells people. And I was just stunned, and I'd said before, do you mind if I take a photo of this? I've got a little blog, I'd love to, because I said we don't see this often. He said, no, of course not. And then I took a photo of them standing together, and then he said to me, well, are you going this way? I'm heading this way. And I said, oh no, I don't want to hold you up, you're running, we're just going to walk down to the car, I'm sure it'll be fine now. And he said, that's not a problem at all. And he walked us 20 minutes back to our car. Rudy was holding his hand, and the other hand he was holding mine, and we walked all the way back to the car. And then I said to him, do you mind if I put this on my blog? And he said, no, not at all. And obviously through the powers of social media, tracked him down, wasn't hard. Got home, literally got a little playroom, and I sat in the playroom, and I just thought, oh, I'm going to quickly put those pictures on. And you know, some of the posts that I've done, I've worked really hard. And this one, I think it was 4 minutes, wrote it down, put the pictures on, put it on, didn't think anything more. And then I looked at it, and I said to my husband, Nigel, I said, this has had loads of shares and loads of, I said, this is like, and you can see a reach. And I said, this is like reached 30,000. And he was like, wow. And for 1,000 followers, that's a big reach. And then I went, oh, hang on a second, it's 200,000. Hang on, this is 1 million. And it just got bigger and bigger. And my phone was blowing up. It was insane. And I found Ian through Instagram, and I said, Ian, I think you should go on to Facebook, because he wasn't on Facebook. He'd come off, and I said, I think you should go on to Facebook and read what everybody's saying about you. I said, because, you know, this is really you should read what people are saying. And he didn't immediately, because I don't think he took it seriously. And then he was getting bombarded with his friends saying, Ian, you're all over Facebook. And then we had the BBC contact us. We even had This Morning contact us. It didn't work out, unfortunately, with their programming. And yes, it's national, but actually it's ended up international. And the post itself ended up reaching 7.5 million, just the Facebook post. And we were on BBC News. We've been on French news. I've had people contacting me from Dubai and Egypt, Australia, France, all over. I can't tell you. Just that one act of kindness in what's been a pretty dark world for the last year, I just think gave everybody a unity. Because people with special needs were able to go, oh yes, somebody that didn't judge, somebody that just did. It wouldn't have mattered whether it was a child having a tantrum or whether it was an autistic child having a meltdown. To Ian, that didn't matter. What he saw was a child who needed a bit of help. And that is, I didn't realise how rare it was until I saw how this post went. And for the SEN community, it was amazing. But for people without SEN to just see that kindness, and it's just been phenomenal. I mean, it's just been amazing. It's made every single thing worthwhile. And from, I look at little Rudy and I think, wow, you know, Rudy's changing the world. And, you know, I've often said, if I can get my children to adults, they will change the world. As long as we can all survive getting there, then these guys are going to change the world. And Rudy has probably reached maybe 25 million people across the world, which is a lot, you know, in our little corner of the world. 25 million people out there know his name, and they've learned the story, and it's amazing.
It is truly amazing. That one moment of human connection and understanding and compassion, and how it's impacted, it literally has impacted millions of people around the world. And I would like to think it's also created a better understanding and I suppose appreciation of such circumstances. So if anyone else were to see what we're going on, just that little bit of understanding and add it together millions and millions of times, how much better the world would be. And once they reach adulthood, I'm sure it'll even be more than that. So amazing story there, Natalie. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I do have a question regarding sensory sense, something we've been working on.
Yeah.
We're currently raising awareness to build a tool to help autistic people with sensory sensitivity issues. Imagine like a Fitbit to help identify triggers. We're still quite a way away, but we're working on development. Would you say a tool like this would have helped you and your children in having a better understanding of their autism, so to speak?
I think with somebody like Rudy, who's got other complex needs, I think the understanding is limited, so it would be hard. I'm not saying forever, but for someone with what's going on with him, because it's not just autism with him. I think for my daughter, something like that, but I kind of, it would depend on, to find, if we all knew the triggers, then we'd be able to prevent the outcome.
Yeah.
It's finding the triggers that's the hard thing.
Yes.
I'm a counsellor, as you know, and I work with young autistic adults, and I'm working with a young lady at the moment. She's about 16 years old, in coming to terms with her diagnosis, and also ways to learn how to regulate. Because I think, again, going back to what we were saying about girls, because they're often diagnosed much later, the best thing for an autistic person is an early diagnosis. Because as soon as they're diagnosed, they can start understanding themselves, other people can understand them, and they can work ways. Rudy's learning already how to self-regulate and things like that. Whereas this young lady was only diagnosed 6 months ago, and she has never learned the skills and strategies. Her skill and strategy was to bottle it all up. And that's not, as we know, a very good strategy. And I'm working with her at the moment to understand her triggers, so that, you know, we know what happens. We know how she feels. We've got that far. We now know how she feels. We now know how it ends up. We're still struggling to understand what it is that triggers. And any tool that could help people understand their triggers around sensory, it's, you know, it's a new world, isn't it? We've got, you know, with what we've got available to us. Absolutely, yeah, anything like that that could help. But I do think there has to be a level of understanding.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's very encouraging. We'll continue the work and fight the good fight, so to speak.
Yes,
you know, this has been a truly wonderful interview, Natalie. We're almost approaching the end of the interview, but I have two final questions. Is there one, well, it might be a massive message. Is there a message you would like to send out to our audience about autism and what it's like to be on, or to what it's like to have autistic children?
So I think the message for me is, don't judge, but no one judge. You know, it's kind of, because it's very easy for us to say, as a SEN parent, it's very easy for me to say that I have been judged for my parenting skills. My children have been judged for their behaviour. But what I often have to remind myself is, how many times have I judged somebody that maybe was looking at me, not in a negative way, but in a, oh, what can I do to help that woman? Because the one thing that came out of the big post that we did is the amount of people that said, oh, I wouldn't know what to do, and now maybe I know. And that's a big thing. So nobody judge. Don't judge other parents, whether they've got SEN in their lives or not. They're doing their best. Don't judge children's behaviour, whether they're acting out neurotypical or they're having a meltdown because they're autistic. They're still struggling in that moment. Just be kind. Ian the hero, he lives by a motto, which I'm stealing from him, and it's be kind to all kinds. And I just love it. And I think it's so true, that just be kind, you know, just don't judge what you don't know, and just be kind. Just a smile or a, you've got this, you're doing a good job. It just goes such a long way and can change somebody's day. Yeah. So that really is my message for people out there. For other mums and dads, especially of newly diagnosed children, it will be okay. It will, because there were moments where I thought, I cannot do this. And if I had £1 for every time somebody said to me, the reason you've got that child is because you can cope, he's been sent to you because you can cope. There were so many times where it's lovely, but I used to think, I can't cope, I'm struggling, because not because there's anything wrong with him, but because I don't know, I didn't know. You will get there, and they will teach you if you allow your children to, and if you accept your children for what they are and don't try and mold them and change them into what they should be because of society. Yes, I feel like I have a duty of care to help my son cope in the world that we live in, but we're going to do it in a slightly quirky, unique way, in a way that suits him. And let them teach you, and it will be okay if you just allow them to teach you and know that you've got it. You've got this. You'll be fine.
It's a wonderful message. Thank you so much, Natalie. And for everyone at home who's been watching this, thank you so much. Natalie, how can our audience find out about more about the work you do, your blog? And by the way, once you do share us, everything will be posted in a link underneath the video too. So for you at home, feel free to click in those links and follow Natalie. Yeah, Natalie, where can we find you?
So Facebook and Instagram, and the account is Better to Be Different. We're really trying to build our Instagram following, so yep, you can find us on there. And we just welcome people, you know, commenting and posting and messaging me. I get so many messages from people, and I love connecting with others, so that's where you'll find us.
That's absolutely wonderful. Yeah, so make sure everyone keep an eye out from there. Better to Be Different. Natalie, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. And for everyone at home, thank you all for listening and for your time too. And if you really resonated with what you listened to today, what you heard Natalie say, we want to hear your story too. So do please get in touch with us and let's put your voice out there in the world. Thank you from everyone at AI4Autism. Thank you, Natalie. And bye for now.